Welcome Education 323 learners. I am very excited to work with you this week to learn more about early literacy, specifically print awareness and letter knowledge. Let's warm up. Before we begin the content of this week, let's practice with a phonemic awareness activity. The learning objective for this activity is that the student will segment phonemes in words. I'm thinking the targeted grade level would be the middle to end of first grade, and this activity came directly from FCRR.org. One more time, the Florida Center for Reading Research, FCRR.org. It is a phonemic awareness activity 0.014. If I did this with students, I would not have the diagram that I have on this screen. This would be the work that would happen in the brains of my learners, and they would demonstrate their understanding by either holding up a number or their fingers to show how many phonemes they hear in the word. So when you're thinking about doing this, please consider those options. I am having this diagram so that we can navigate it more easily online. So I might begin by saying, first graders, you're all doing a great job with using your ears to listen for sounds in words. Today we are going to again listen to the word. You're going to be asked to say it to yourself while counting the number of sounds you hear. When I ask, you will hold up the number with your fingers or the card in front of you, or you will shout it out. We will practice our think, answer routine. So please don't shout out until I say answer. I will do the first one for you to refresh your brain and engage your thinking. Desk. Now I will repeat that word in my mind, and I will count the individual sounds by tapping my fingers on my thumb or on my desk. D-e-s-k. Desk. When I say answer, you will share the number of sounds that you heard in desk. I heard 4, so I would say 4. And then I might respond to you by saying, yes, there are 4 sounds in the word desk. All right, is everyone ready? The next word is map. All right, say it to yourself. Count the sounds. App. And now think and answer. Yes, there are 3 phonemes in the word map. Map. Next, let's use the word tie. Tie. I like to tie my shoe. Tie. How many sounds do you hear in the word tie? Think. Answer. Yes. If you said 2, you are correct. There are 2 sounds. T, I. Even though there are 3 letters in the word tie, we only hear 2 sounds. Book. I like to read my book. How many sounds do you hear in the word book? Tap it out. Think and answer. Yes, there are 3 sounds in the word book. Next, candle. Candle. I lit the candle. Think. K-a-n-d-o. Candle. How many sounds do you hear in the word candle? 5. That is correct. There are 5 sounds in the word candle. We will try one more. The word is piano. I take piano lessons. Piano. How many sounds do you hear in the word piano? All right, think and answer. And if you said 5, you are correct. There are 5 sounds in the word piano. Hopefully, by doing this review of phonemic awareness, you are reminded of how important it is for students to do the hard work that happens inside the brain to isolate and identify sounds. In this particular activity, I asked students to segment. We can also do activities like blend, add, delete, and this activity was phonemic awareness. We can also warm up with phonological awareness. And I hope to bring other activities to you every time we start our lectures. So thanks for playing along and participating, and hopefully it was a good review. I did have the word soap and the word knee on my list, but we didn't need to do all of those. Now let's continue with our work regarding print awareness and letter knowledge. The essential question is, how can my understanding of print awareness and letter knowledge support emergent literacy? Our assignments this week are going to be over 2 weeks. So we'll work on weeks 2 and 3. In week 2, I really asked you to spend some time with explicit instruction. There was a PowerPoint lecture and also an article that you were asked to read and a response to that. This week, we're really going to focus on the print awareness and letter knowledge. And that is going to really have a good understanding of this. I'm going to recommend that you review word structures that are in our textbook regarding phonemes, phonic elements, syllable types, onset rhyme, morphemes, and this is on pages 24 and 47. Part of the reason that I want you to review it is because it is an excellent resource page, and I think it'll be beneficial for you to have this information, or at least know where it is and what's in our book for any lesson planning that you do, any planning, and anything you do with your observations or your student teaching. So do become familiar with what's on pages 24 to 47. And then I'd like you to really zoom in and critically read and take focus notes on chapters 3, print awareness, the when and how sections, pages 76 through 82, and chapter 4, letter knowledge, the why, the when, the how, pages 92 to 95. When you're done reading and taking notes, you're going to come upon some modeled lessons. This is the method of instruction. This is the how portion of our textbook. And there are 3 areas of lessons. There are the letter knowledge, that's on pages 96 through 112, and it is broke down into letter recognition, handwriting, and letter sound correspondence. I would like for you to take notes on those lessons, and then I'd like you to rank your top 3 lessons on Harmonize, which is an app that will be in Blackboard. Please include the name of the lesson that you have ranked as your top 1, 1 sentence summary about what connected or how you liked it, why you selected it, and how you think it's beneficial. And there will be more about that in Blackboard. So how can my understanding of print awareness and letter knowledge support emergent literacy? In Blackboard, there is a note-taking template. And I think it will be important for you to follow along and use this template. It is just a framework. You're going to have to add your own information, but I kind of organized it so that it would guide you through the PowerPoint and the reading of both weeks. So set up your notes. Really be thoughtful and intentional in recording the major components, and then add questions and a summary. And I will be grading these notes and the summary this week. So before we can really move into this learning, we need to kind of explore Erie's stages of reading. And in the essential question in the beginning, I talked about emergent reading or an emergent reader. So I think it's important for you to know what an emergent reader really is. So as a quick reminder, an emergent reader is someone who knows some letters of the alphabet. They understand that writing conveys a message. They might scribble writing when they're writing, and they may recognize some words or letters in their environment. Words like stop or exit, or they might recognize the M in McDonald's as the arches. And so they are not yet reading. And so these are students that are probably in that pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, hopefully moving out of emergent reading into first grade. So Erie's phases are really, there are 4, and they are the development of word reading. This is going to specifically focus on the ages of 4 to 6. So you might look at emergent readers in having these 4 stages. So pre-alphabetic, early alphabetic, later alphabetic, and consolidated alphabetic. And so I just wanted to reference that Erie's phases of word reading development can be broke down into these stages, and it helps to be able to categorize what the pre-alphabetic stage looks like versus the later alphabetic or vice versa. So you can spend some time, you can pause and study that chart as you wish. And the link to the article regarding emergent reading is right here on the slide. In addition to Erie's phases of reading, there's also a developmental progression of concepts of print for pre-readers and early readers. This actual document is from our optional text that I recommended called Reading Above the Fray. Looking at these indicators, starting at the top from the earliest down to the later time period, really allows us as teachers to think about all of the steps, all of the pieces of the puzzle that have to come together for our children to break the code and actually learn how to read. As you may have learned in your foundations class, reading is not natural. Speaking is natural, but reading requires orthography or a connection of sounds to letters and a realization that words on a print represent spoken words that are in our oral language. So when you look at these indicators, you can see from the top that it's really a child noticing print, understanding that print contains meaning, identifying basic book parts from the front to the back covers, the spine, the title, identifying print on a page, realizing that words on the page are made up of letters. So being able to point to a letter, truly understanding the directionality, left to right, beginning at the top, left, and ending at the bottom right. Noticing contextualized print or print in pictures. And then continuing their progression to understanding the function or the purpose of the print elements. Understanding really, truly line by line or page order is something more advanced. And then looking at the specific letters to understand whether they're uppercase or lowercase. What's capitalized? Where are the spaces? What's the difference between letters, words, sentences? And then identifying punctuation. One of the last progressions of concepts of print for pre-readers and early readers is being able to follow along with your finger and pointing and tracking one-to-one correspondence of words. I found it very interesting that in addition to this progression of concepts of print, there are also very explicit digital text concepts. And we always need to make sure that our readers that are reading on an iPad understand the navigation, what the icons stand for, what it means to swipe or how to, again, follow word-to-word narration and tracking that reading with their eyes. All of these concepts are very important in this stage and need to be explicitly taught. So let's begin with print awareness, and let's focus on the why, the when, and the how. So print awareness is not something that happens naturally. Like reading, it must be taught. And it happens or is taught, introduced predominantly in the home. Anytime a child is read to, anytime a child recognizes or notices environmental print, those are all indicators of print awareness. Mostly print is knowledge that is acquired during the preschool years, and by the end of kindergarten, students should have some basic concepts of print. And that basic knowledge of print might include that they know the parts of a book. They know how a book is held, how it's read. You might know what a title is or the difference between an author and an illustrator. They know that we move left to right and top to bottom. They know the relationship between print and pictures, and they understand that there's a message or a concept that is in books. They might know the difference between letters and words, and they know that sentences in print are made up of separate words. They also recognize that there are spaces between words. So all of these things are part of that basic concept of print. We always need to be aware that children from a lower socioeconomic status are often at risk due to less exposure to print experiences. Perhaps they don't have as many books in their home. Perhaps they haven't been read to as much. They haven't had adults pointing out letters and singing the alphabet song and or watching or experiencing opportunities to grow print awareness. So to promote print awareness for all children, but especially for those from a lower socioeconomic status, we really need to create a print-rich environment. We need to provide plenty of read-aloud experiences, and we really need to encourage parents to do the same. We need to embed print referencing cues in shared storybook reading. So if we are doing a shared storybook or we are reading aloud to students, we really want to draw attention to what the print awareness concepts are and just give them those experiences. And this really was referenced in page 76 of our source book textbook. It is important that we assess print awareness. So students with little or no experience with print are at risk, and we want right off the bat to be able to give them what is needed so that they can get caught up, because they are high-risk students and may struggle with decoding. So print awareness should be assessed 3 times a year to kindergartners. It should happen in the fall, the winter, and the spring, and you should really ask the questions. You should give them a book and see if they know how to open it, watch how they handle the book, see if they can move left to right, top to bottom, and give them an opportunity to show you what they know about a closed book, how it can be opened, and then also ask lots of questions about the book once they have it opened up. And some of it might be, can you show me a word? Can you show me a space? Can you tell me how many words are in this sentence? Can you show me where I should start reading? Can you show me which way I should go when I read? When I come to the end of this line, where do I go next? Those are all questions that you should be asking your students in terms of a print awareness assessment. There are also formal assessments. They come in the form of screeners and some progress monitoring options and some diagnostic assessments. One of them is PALS, and that stands for Phonological Awareness Literacy. And then there is a screening, FastBridge early reading, and a TPRI early reading assessment. All of those are more of the formal assessments, but will give you the valuable information about print awareness. and they need to have print awareness before they can move into letter knowledge. So let's go ahead and move into letter knowledge. And just for your information, our question is, why is letter knowledge important? So one of the reasons is that letter knowledge has a foundational role in literacy development. It is the very first thing that we really want to make sure students can identify, and that is the letters. Often, the sound, also known as a phoneme, that a letter represents is part of the letter's name. So knowing the names of letters assists with sound spelling connections. And truly, this whole piece of phonemic awareness, or recognizing the sounds in words, is the prerequisite for decoding, but it's also needed for sound spelling connections. Once the letter names, shapes, and sounds are known, more attention can be given for sound spelling relationships. Basically, letter knowledge is necessary for reading. So do you remember the simple view of reading, the SVR? We said that word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension, and reading comprehension is the ultimate goal of reading. So where would print awareness and letter recognition live in the simple view of reading? Kind of a trick question. All right, we'll back up. How about print awareness? Where would that live? If you said language or listening comprehension, you are correct. So print awareness is part of our listening language comprehension in realizing that what we're saying is connected to words, and our environmental print, vocabulary, how to handle a book, all of those kinds of things are part of the listening language comprehension. However, knowledge of letters, or letter knowledge, is actually a prerequisite to word recognition, so it would live on the word recognition side. A child's ability to identify the letters of the alphabet by name is one of the best predictors of how readily he or she will learn to read. So it is very, very important that we teach explicitly all of the letters of the alphabet and identify them with name, sound, and shape. Let's learn a little bit more about that. Did you know that learning to recognize letters is different than learning to recognize other objects? A child learns to recognize an object no matter how they're tipped, from the left, the right, or upside down. If I have a chair and I turn it to the side, guess what? It's still a chair. If I put the chair upside down, it's still a chair. And our brain knows this and recognizes it. But letters don't work that way. It requires something called mirror invariance, and it allows this thinking. But the reading brain has to look at letters differently. So if you look at the letter B and you flip it upside down, you could end up getting, yes, you guessed it, the letter P. And if you turn it, you're going to end up with the letter Q. And so the brain has to learn how to recognize letters, and that's different than how it recognized objects. So think about the letters B and the letter D, the letters P and the letter Q. Objects remain themselves in every orientation, but letters do not, which is also why sometimes preschoolers really have a lot of reversals because their brain has not mastered the mirror discrimination. It is what is needed to learn the letters. It is also an explanation of why the letter O and X are easier to learn than the letters P, B, B, P, D, B, and Q. And it has to do with the fact that Letters that are symmetrical, either vertically or horizontally, or in the case of X, both horizontal and vertical, are easier for the brain to process. I think that's so fascinating. This is an actual example of how my first grade nephew wrote his name. It is an absolute mirror reflection of the correct way. So when you look at this picture and the name Bryce underneath it, what can you tell me about the way he wrote his name? What has he mastered? What has he not grasped? And why is looking at his name not surprising? Bryce, at this stage of development, had not mastered mirror invariance. He wrote backwards. He moved from the right to the left, and he wrote every single letter backwards. He's now graduated from high school as a valedictorian and is going to be attending a university. So he did master it and much more, but we as educators need to understand how learning letters is very different from objects, and we need to help children learn all of their letters and master these concepts. Did you know it takes the average child hundreds of exposures, 2 to 4 years, for a letter to be fully automatic in memory by both visual features and name, and then also by sound? And this is a statistic that was shared by Jan Birkins and Carrie Yates in a book called Shifting the Balance. So imagine if a child comes into your classroom and they haven't had a lot of exposure to their print awareness, and therefore they don't have letter knowledge. They are going to start out behind, and it will be our responsibility to make sure they get caught up and that they have additional experiences and a little bit more one-on-one so that they are able to learn those letters, the sounds, the name, and how to write it. When should letter knowledge be taught? Kindergartners should be formally taught to name, recognize, and write both uppercase and lowercase letters. In addition, they must be able to identify the sounds that the letters make. It must be systematically and explicitly taught. In other words, you should know your scope and sequence, and you should know when you're going to teach what letter and how much time you're going to spend on it. And they should be given many opportunities to experience the letter. I remember when I student taught in kindergarten, we spent one whole week on a letter, but that is no longer recommended. We'll get to that. Why is it important to know letter names and sounds? Well, orthographic processing begins with correct identification and discrimination of individual letters. And the discrimination of confusing letters is facilitated by having a name for each of them. So you should always speak clearly about their name and their sound and how the letters are made and consistently making them. Many letter names contain the speech sounds they represent and provide clues for the phoneme grapheme mapping. When we talk about phoneme grapheme mapping, we're really talking about the sound letter correlation. So spelling, whether oral or silent, requires the memory for letter names. All of these are important reasons why students need to know letter names and sounds. All right, on your note sheet, we are going to take a quiz. We're actually going to take 2 quizzes. So if you don't have your note-taking sheet out, you will want to get it now. You can pause the video and then take it out. All right, so here's our quiz. Please don't worry about being accurate. I'm not grading the quiz. I'm just wanting to engage your thinking and challenge yourself. First question, how many letters are in the alphabet? Next, how many symbols are in our alphabet? Third, how many phonemes or speech sounds are there represented in the English language? And how many graphemes are used to spell the English phonemes? All right, here are your answers. Let's see how you did. First question, how many letters are in the alphabetic system? 26. There are 52 symbols. That includes uppercase and lowercase. There are 44 common phonemes in English. Remember that phonemes are the sounds used to make spoken words. So 26 letters, 44 sounds, and 200 graphemes. And a grapheme is a letter combination. So the 44 phonemes, it takes 200 graphemes to make the 44 phonemes. An orthography is the spelling system for language. And when we say that English has a deep orthography, we mean that the relationship between letters and sounds is not always aligned directly. It's not one-to-one. If it were one-to-one, we would have 44 phonemes, 44 graphemes, but that is not the case. So we say that English has a deep orthography. An example of this is, how many ways can you think of for a long E to be spelled? Right off the top of my head, I can think about 4. You can spell it E-E, you can spell it E consonant E, you can spell it E-I. So those are just 3. And in other languages, there are usually a one-to-one correspondence, or if they don't have a one-to-one correspondence, we say that it has a deep orthography. English learners are expected to know many sound spellings and then remember which one to use for a particular word. But even with that, it's important to teach phonics because 50% of our English words follow the rules of phonics. 36% of our words have only one irregular spelling, and 14% of our words are needed for explicit instruction. So even though we have a deep orthography, there are ways that we can accomplish breaking the code and teaching our children to read. Now we're going to have some fun. And I want to see what you know about the names and the sounds of the English alphabet. Again, this is not graded. I do want you to be honest and write the answers the best that you can, but you don't have to worry about it being graded. It's going to be more of like a pass-fail, because if you do it and you have something written on your notes, you're going to receive credit because you will take notes that are best suited to your learning style. So if you look in your focus note template, you're going to see that I gave you the tool that is needed for this next assignment, and that is the 26 letters. So the alphabet is listed in front of you, and you're going to need to pause this PowerPoint in order to answer the questions and then resume when you're ready. So you're going to need a paper, pencil, and the 26 letters. And if we were in person, I would have you have 26 letters in front of you, and they would all be laid out on your desk. And then I would ask the question, and I would ask you to move the letters that meet the characteristic that I'm about to share. and you'd pull those letters down. Since that isn't possible, you can just write them down. So here we go. Let's begin. Name the letters that have the name is the same as the sound. So the name of the letter is the same as the sound it makes. There are 4. You may pause. All right. The answer is A, E, I, O. A says A, E says E, I says I, and O says O. Next question. Name the letters that begin with the sound of their name. So their name begins with the sound they make. Their name begins with the sound it makes. And there are 9. So pause. All right, are you ready? Here's the answer. B. So B, B. It ends with an E sound, but the beginning is the same as its name. D, J, K, P, Q, T, V, Z. All of those letters' names begin with the sound they make. All right, are you ready? The next is name the letter that ends with the sound that it makes. So the letter B starts with B, E, and it begins with the sound that it makes. It's the same as its name. These are letters that end with the sound that it makes. Ready? Here we go. F. So it starts with an E. F. F says F. Ooh. L starts again with an E sound, but it makes the same sound at the end. L, M, N, R, S, and X. All right, next question. Which letters' names overlap with another? So their name overlaps with the name of another letter. There are, I think, 2 pairs. So go ahead and pause. All right, are you ready for me to share? Here we go. S says S. Excuse me. C says S. G says J. And there's an overlap of sounds and names. C, S. So the second part of S is the first part of C. J, G, and J, A. So G and J. They start out, the beginnings have the same sounds. All right. Name the letters that do not have the sound they make in their name. Pause. All right, are you ready? Here are the 3. How many did you get correct? The answer is H, W, and Y. So H says H, and H does not have H in its name. W says W, and it does not have W. It does not have W in its name. And Y is in Y, and that does not either. All right. Now, name a letter that is confused with a sound. So sometimes the letter name is confused with a letter sound. Pause. And answer. And this is our last question and answer game. If you're following along in your focus notes, you know this to be true. But here's the answer. They are Y and U, Y and W, and W. So those are the names of the letters that are sometimes confused with the sounds that are made. U, a lot of children get confused because the Y is Y-O-U and it's ya, ya. And is U. And then Y, ya, and W has a U in it. So that's confusing. So these are the confusing sounds and letters. Please note that many students do confuse the letters U, Y, and W. Their name does not help with the sound, so you have to provide that additional practice with those letters even more than others. Learning to write them will help connect letter name, sound, and their form. And that is actually the case with all letters. You could really stand up and have students spell the letters with their hands because that large motor moves into long-term memory. It's why once you learn how to ride a bike, you always know how to ride a bike. And so even a small fine motor spelling versus a great big huge spelling of letters is really one way to move it into the long-term memory. You can do a lot of practice activities with learning letters. So speaking of that, let's talk about instruction. How should instruction of letter knowledge begin? Well, first of all, the more experience that students have with phonemic awareness, that phonological awareness, preparing students to do that hard brain work of listening to sounds and words, which is an essential skill for reading, it is going to be easier to learn letter knowledge because they will have connected the sounds and words, the number of words in sentences, onset rhyme, syllables, and all of those very important concepts. So then when it comes time to learn the knowledge of letters, it will connect better to the brain. So it's recommended that you teach one new letter every 1 to 2 days. So, but the really important piece is you shouldn't give equal time to all the letters. So for instance, you might spend 1 day on the letter B because it's something they're familiar with, or the letter A, but you're probably going to give W a good 2 or 3 days because W is much harder and we really want to move it into long-term memory. So we want to spell it, we want to compare it, we want to analyze the sounds, we want to find words that have W in it, we want to play games, we want to talk about how it's lowercase and uppercase are alike and different. Anything and everything we can do to move through all the senses is going to help with those letter knowledge components of how to say it, spell it, write it, and of course the sound, which is the next component. You truly need to focus on that sound symbol association. And to do this kind of instruction, we need to use a combination of direct instruction and play-based experimentation with manipulatives. Everyone should have a set of letters, whether they're on cardstock or whether you have some centers or you have magnetic letters. We need to see letters of all sizes and shapes and colors, and we want to really focus on the uppercase, lowercase sound, how to write them, the sounds they make, and so on. In addition to knowing the letters' shape, sound, and being able to identify it, it is imperative that when we are teaching letter knowledge, we have an explicitly listed curriculum of the order in which we teach it, and that it's systematically, and that explicit and systematic teaching is taught to everyone. So this really includes a lot of information about their letter names, sounds, and forms, similar to what I mentioned on the previous slide. It's also important to know that similar letters should not be taught at the same time. So when you have the organization of which letters to teach when, make sure that you're not teaching M and N and W at the same time. So M and W are very similar, and M and N are very similar. So when you think about it, you should maybe not teach the letters from the middle of the alphabet, L, M, N, O, P, at one time, but rather separate them and put them at different places. You also need to think visually or phonetically that sound the same. So B and D, B and D would be similar. K and K are similar. So those are confusing when you teach them together. And then last but not least, you want to think about the infrequent letters. W, X, Z, J, Q, and Y are a little bit more challenging. It's also important with the instruction of letters that you establish and follow an efficient and effective routine. So you might do very similar things and have that repetition so students are beginning to predict what is going to happen with the learning of each of the letters. Efficient really refers to fast pace. We want this to be fast paced to keep their brains going, to move it through so that they are able to really interact with you, engage their thinking, and not be bored. And then last, it's very important that you assess your students to respond to the specific needs of the children based on the assessment of what letters they do and don't have mastered, and they might need some additional repetition. And so making sure that your letter instruction includes these 4, and then lastly, we're going to look at the last point for letter knowledge instruction, which is making sure that you support alphabet knowledge with real reading contexts. Those real reading contexts can happen in a read aloud or a shared reading experience. And this traditional print concept page is from, again, Reading Above the Fray, page 53. But you can see how important it is for students to understand the title, the cover, the author, where to start, which direction to move, identify various letters, move into sentences, words, and then spaces. And so one of the experiences that we're going to do this week is to find a child that is in that emergent literacy stage, often preschool through kindergarten, and read aloud to that child and then assess their letter knowledge. On page 77 of the source book, we're going to be referencing that informal assessment and reflect on that, and that will be one of your assignments. So the letter knowledge assessment for emergent readers must be able to identify the letters in and out of sequence with automaticity and accuracy. And those assessments need to include the letter naming of upper letters and lowercase letters in 1 minute. So there are various assessments that are included for letter knowledge assessment. And then it's really important for you to assess that and do that small group teaching and reinforce those concepts. The ability to write the letters and words legibly, quickly and accurately is also an assessment for letter knowledge assessment. And then finally, our assignments for week 2 with print awareness and letter knowledge are going to basically include 2 things. One, that you take focused notes, interact with your notes, and give your brain repetition, write a summary, and respond to the essential question. All of the reading assignments were discussed at the beginning of this PowerPoint. They're also listed in Blackboard. You're going to be looking at the how of print awareness and letter knowledge by evaluating some lessons and writing just a 1-sentence summary about the 3 areas: letter recognition, handwriting, and letter sound correspondence. And then, as I referenced previously, you're going to be reading aloud and assessing a pre-K kindergarten child, and then complete the read aloud reflection assignment, also listed in Blackboard. If you have any questions, please let me know. Make sure that you're critically reading and taking focus notes, and really truly owning your learning. It is where actual learning lives. Hope you're having a great week, and we'll be in touch.